Okay guys, welcome back, and in this video and actually the next couple of videos we're going to take a look at analytical writing, specifically essay writing. So I would imagine that you've done quite a bit of essay writing over the years, and you may have done bits and pieces on how to construct your essays as well. But in these videos I'm going to break down in a lot of detail how you would approach your essay, depending on what type of essay it is and how you want to construct your arguments. Okay, so just to begin with, we want to be clear on what type of essay it is that we're actually writing. So there are two main types of essays. The first one on the left-hand side here is the discursive or the exploratory essay. And discursive is obviously related to the word discussion, and obviously exploratory, exploration as well. So a discursive essay is basically an essay where you're looking in an open-minded way at the two sides, perhaps even various sides to an argument, and you're exploring the different ideas. Okay, so the key point with the discursive essay is that you're going to be looking at both sides of the debate. Now that's a really crucial element. You're looking at both in an open-minded way, and then you don't conclude until the end. You don't finalize your thoughts until the end. And so finalize ideas at the end. So that's one type of essay. The other type of essay is the legalistic essay. It could also be an article as well, where you'd be arguing a certain viewpoint. And the crucial difference here is that in a legalistic style essay or in an article, you're putting forward one viewpoint. So you put forward one side of the argument. So the reason we call it a legalistic essay is because in this process you're a little bit like a lawyer arguing your case. So a lawyer in a court of law does not argue the case for their opponent. They don't look at both sides. They just put forward their side of the argument. They put forward their case. And you would do the same in an article as well, where you were arguing something. So this is a slightly different format. You would actually probably outline your main argument quite early on, and then you give as much support as you can. So you support your line of argument. So in a legalistic or article setting, you're actually aiming to be a little bit more persuasive in how you approach things. And first of all, we're just going to take a look at the discursive or exploratory essay format. We'll look at the legalistic essay in the next video. Okay, so before we get started, here are a few general guidelines. It's a little bit of a rule book really for analytical writing in general. So rule number one here is you want to use impersonal constructions. So in your discursive essay, for instance, you're going to be looking at both sides of the argument. So you don't want to begin your argument, or you don't want to begin your exploration with on one side saying, I think this, and I think this. And then as you look at the other arguments, then you go on to say, well, I think that, I think that, when these 2 points of view may be contradictory. You don't want to be contradicting yourself in that way. So what you want to do is present your arguments in an impersonal way. And the way you do this, you use impersonal language. So for example, it can be argued, that an important point to consider is ... So we want to be using these types of constructions in personal language. One might argue, one might say, many people think that. You just want to try and keep it impersonal. And then it's only really at the end of your discursive essay where you might come in then with your own viewpoint, your own angle on things. So by using impersonal constructions when you need to, it gives you a lot more room for maneuver. Okay, so rule number 2 here is be precise in your language. So you want to be as precise as possible. You know, you really want to clarify exactly what you mean in your statements. Don't be sloppy with your language. Don't be too general. Try to be as precise as you possibly can. Okay, so number 3 here is backing up your point. So do make sure that you back up your ideas with examples, with statistics if possible, or at the very least with a clear, rational argumentation. So this is something that we're really trying to get students to do at GCSE level and even before that, because really this relates to evidence, you know, which I would say is the foundation of most of the things that we really value in our whole society, in modern society anyway. The reason that we have all of the science, all of the medicine, all the technology that we have developed is basically, it's partly due to iteration, which is trial and error effectively, but it's largely due to evidence, particularly stuff like medicine as well. So really what we're trying to do across all disciplines is to ensure that people are able to understand this point. If you put something forward, you have to give evidence for it. And as you go higher up in your education, if you do go higher up, what you see is there are different levels of evidence. There are different levels of validity of evidence. But at this point, we just want to make sure that you're putting forward evidence. It's absolutely crucial. Number 4, stick to the question. So it's okay to go off on little tangents and little explorations, but do make sure that you bring those back round to the question and show how the point you just made does relate back to the question. The other thing I would say as well is in your introduction, you may well want to deconstruct some of the terminology in the question itself. So some of the key points, some of the key terms, that will be something to bring in your introduction. A sign of a good candidate is one who is really able to cater their argument and their insights to the question. Okay, so now moving on to the basic format of the discursive or exploratory essay. And so it's actually very straightforward. It's incredibly easy to structure. So that's really a good thing. There's not much work you have to do on that side of things. It's just a case of what you actually put in at each level and how you construct your arguments and ideas. Okay, so let's take a look first of all at the introduction. So in the introduction, you want to do a few different things. You want to define the terms, as I just mentioned on the previous slide. There may be some terminology in the intro that your reader is not entirely sure about, so you'd want to define that terminology. Second of all, you may also want to set a time frame as well. Is this a debate that has been raging for centuries, or is this something that's relatively new? So set a time frame as well. In addition, you want to give a general outline of the debate or the issue. So you just introduce it in general terms. What is it all about? What's going on? Those are the 3 kind of main things that you want to do in your introduction. If you do that, you're going to have a pretty solid introduction, and then you can move on to the main argument proper. So in our kind of main section of exploration, we're going to split it into one side and the other side. And so first of all, let's say we put forward 2 or 3 arguments for side A, and then after that we put forward 2 or 3 arguments for side B. And you're going to have more or less a paragraph per argument, and you want to make sure that you do explore your ideas in depth. And this means you want to give examples and evidence, and you also want to draw meaning and do good analysis as well in this section. And then next up, the kind of opposing section. So do make sure you're using your discourse markers and your essay phrases that we looked at in the previous video right the way through your essay to orientate your reader. And as you're exploring arguments on the other side, again, you want to do exactly the same thing. Give examples, give evidence, and do some analysis as well. Even if these are arguments that you don't think are that strong, you still want to explore them before you come to your conclusion. So in your discursive essay, the conclusion is really important, because it's at this point where you really say which side of the fence you actually are standing on. So at this point, you give your position, and your position really should be based on which side has the stronger evidence, which side you feel has the better arguments. You might also say, are there weaknesses in one of the sides as well? Are there any weaknesses in the arguments that are put forward, or are the arguments just maybe less relevant, less important? So it might be that one side, it does have some arguments and they are valid, but they're just not that important in relation to the arguments on the other side. So you look at the relative importance of arguments, and there's all sorts of debates. One of the things you've got to watch out for when you're learning about a debate is, don't think that just because 2 arguments are presented side by side in this discursive exploratory essay format, don't think that both of those arguments have equal merit just because they're presented in a more or less balanced way. That's a fallacy. It's not necessarily the case. You could have one very strong argument presented next to an argument that is borderline irrelevant. Other things you can also do in the conclusion, you want to end on a resounding note. So you want to make it interesting. So there's different things you can do. One of the things you can do is you can look to the future and say, well, I don't really know where this debate is going, or I don't know where this issue is heading, or maybe I predict that it's going to head in this direction. That's quite an interesting way to follow on. So if you can, you want to end on some kind of an interesting comment. It just ends the essay on a kind of stimulating note. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at a discursive essay. This is a kind of classic discursive essay task where you're given a provocative statement and then you're asked to discuss it. So you're asked to explore both sides of the statement. And I've chosen social media for this exercise. I suspect it's going to be a topic that is going to come up within the next 2 to 3 years, perhaps this summer, because it is a contemporary topic. It's a big point of debate, so it's kind of something that probably will be quite easy for students to comment on and could provoke some really interesting essays from students. So I think I do expect this to come up in the next few years. So what I want you to do now is just pause the video, and I just want you to have a go now at this exercise. So just draw 4 columns like this and label them intro, one side, other side, or side A, side B, and then conclusion. Okay, so what I want you to do is first of all just draw your 4 columns, and then we're going to go through them one by one. Okay, so once you've drawn those, I want you first of all just to think about how you would introduce this topic. How might you do that, bearing in mind the points I just made slightly earlier in this video. So again, just pause the video and take a few moments just to note down how you would introduce this essay on social media. Okay, so let's have a look at this here. So, social media is destroying people's minds and their self-esteem. Discuss this statement. So in my intro, I would say here, first of all, there's definitely some terms I need to define. So I'm going to define some terms. The terms I'm going to have to define are social media and probably self-esteem as well. I think that will be another one I would want to define. So social media, I find a definition for that. Internet platforms that allow people to share content, photos, commentary, something like that. Self-esteem, how people feel about themselves, how good they feel on a day-to-day basis. So I would attempt to define those terms initially, just so we know what we're working with. Then probably I would also pick apart the question a little bit. So I look at the word here, destroying. It's okay, well this is a pretty strong word. So I would actually look at the question itself and go, okay, or the statement, and I would probably question the statement. I would analyze the statement. Destroying is a very strong term. So we're going to have to be careful with whether we really do agree with this statement or not. Beyond that, I can also look at the time frame. Time frame probably about a 10-year period. I mean, social media has been around longer than that, but it's really kind of ramped up, I would say, in the last 10 years, probably really ramped up in the last 8 years. So this is not an infinitely long debate. This is a recent one. Let's say 8 to 10 years. Okay, so following on from the time frame, we also want to define the issue a little bit as well, and we can just give a brief introduction to some of the downsides to social media. We just say there are multiple problems that have arisen due to the introduction of social media into people's lives. Okay, so we've got our introduction there. Now I'm going to look at one side of the debate, and let's begin with the side of the debate which actually agrees with this statement, that social media is destroying people's minds and it is destroying their self-esteem. So agreeing with statement. We'll just think about the various points we could make. Okay, so again, I just want you to pause the video and have a go at drawing up a few points which would suggest that social media is having a negative impact on people's minds and their self-esteem. If you need to do a little bit of research online, you can also do that now. Okay, so hopefully you have a few decent points to be going on with, and I won't actually make the points here because I kind of want you to fill the gaps in here. But obviously there's a lot of studies you could have looked at. Even just a brief Google search of this will give you lots of information of the downsides and negative impacts, things like attention span, cyberbullying, general kind of dissatisfaction based on people comparing their lives to other people. So there's plenty of downsides, plenty of arguments you could make there. Okay, so next up we're going to take a look at the other side of social media, the side that says actually this isn't damaging at all, this is actually a good thing. So again, just pause the video and write down a few arguments. Again, you might want to go and do some research, write down a few arguments that you could use for the other side. Okay, so again, hopefully you do have some arguments that would disagree with this statement and would actually put forward the view social media is a positive thing, it has its benefits, you know, and there's all sorts of ideas you could put forward. It keeps people in touch, keeps families together, or keeps them in touch at least when perhaps if they're different family members in different countries or at least different cities, which is almost universal nowadays. So it does kind of help that side of things. It also allows people to share information, share maybe a good cause that they think they want to get behind, and all sorts of other things as well. Okay, so there are plenty of points you could make on this side of things. Now finally, in your conclusion, you want to basically state your position at this point. So what is your position? And okay, so it's important that you're not cornered by the statement. Don't feel that you have to either fully agree or fully disagree. You can take a refined position on this. So you could say, actually, I really do agree that social media is just completely destroying people's minds and their self-esteem, and I don't really see the positives of it, and I don't think they're very impactful. So you could say that you really favor one side or you favor the other side. So for example, I just think social media is terrible and it has really no positive impacts whatsoever, and the opposite arguments I just don't find to be valid, or I don't find them very persuasive. Or you could say, you know, actually I think it's this great thing, and the downside to it is so minimal compared to the upside. The other thing you can obviously do is you can state a refined position, and I would probably recommend that you do that, because in most cases they're going to give you a provocative statement that kind of pushes you in one direction or another, and what you want to do is you want to kind of maintain equilibrium and state a sensible, refined position based on what you think the overall picture is. So, I mean, sometimes the overall picture may well favor one side, but something like this, I think the two sides are actually fairly well balanced. So you might want to just refine things and say, on the one hand, on the other hand, overall, I think social media is maybe a bad thing overall. Maybe overall it's a good thing. So you might also think about how we navigate the world of social media going forward. And is this something that's going to continue to crop up in the future, this debate? Okay, so once you've done this plan, I would recommend that you go away, you set a timer for 45 minutes, and you try and write this essay in about 40 minutes, giving yourself 5 minutes or so to check. So you have more or less 10 minutes per section. You might take 7 or 8 minutes for the intro and conclusion, and maybe 10 or 12 minutes on the main arguments. Just see how you do with that. Obviously, it would then be great if you could get feedback from somebody who is qualified to give you feedback, either a teacher, a tutor, or maybe somebody else that you know who would be qualified. So hopefully this exercise has helped you to break down how to approach a discursive essay. If you want to see an example of a fairly well-written exploration of this topic, you can find it in the text guide. But make sure you do the exercise for yourself first. Don't just jump into the text guide and read a kind of pre-prepared essay. Do the exercise first. That's going to be much more useful. And then afterwards, you might want to go and look at the text guide just to see how kind of these techniques play out. Okay, so that's the discursive essay. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the article or the legalistic essay. So I'll see you in there.